My name is Amos Winter, and I run a group at MIT called Mobility Lab, and we work on innovative mobility solutions primarily for use in developing countries. And today I'm going to talk to you about the Leveraged Freedom Chair, which I'm riding in this picture, which is a wheelchair we're developing specifically for use in developing countries. And I'd like to tie that into, I guess, the theme of today in what the future holds for global design, research, and education. And I'm a mechanical engineer, and so by design, I'm talking about like mechanical design and product design. So to give you an intro to the LFC, it's a wheelchair meant specifically for use in the rugged terrain encountered in the developing world. And we were lucky enough this year to win an R&D 100 award and the American Society of Mechanical Engineers Innovation Showcase for this design. The aim of the project is to create a singular mobility aid that can fully meet the needs of people with disabilities in developing countries. And to do this, you need to have a machine that is, one, both capable of long-distance travel on varied terrain in order to get to your job or get to school. And if you live in a rural area, that might mean going on dirt walking paths or rough roads. And also be small enough to use within the home or within your job like a normal wheelchair. The key innovation, the motivation behind this project is that, one, between 20 and 40 million people in the developing world need a wheelchair but don't have one. And the majority of those people live in rural areas where their only connection to their community might be on dirt walking paths or rough roads or rough terrain. And existing products that, if people are lucky enough to get, cannot fully meet their mobility needs. If you get a conventional style wheelchair like you see in the upper picture, that works great indoors. It's mobile in tight spaces. You can get into bathrooms and bedrooms, but try to picture going 2 miles to work on a dirt road. Unless you're a totally jacked 30-year-old guy, it's probably not going to happen. And you know, the majority of the population aren't jacked 30-year-old guys. The more prevalent product you see throughout the developing world is something like the lower picture, a hand-powered tricycle that you pedal with your hands like a bicycle, and you power the front wheel. And these products are great. They're fast and efficient on flat ground, but when you get into soft soil or climb up hills, they lose traction easily. And they're also too big to use indoors. So when you get to your home or get to a job, you still have to crawl around on the ground. And that can be dangerous if you're crawling around something like a pit latrine. So the key innovation behind our wheelchair is the fixed gear ratio variable speed drivetrain. And the way the machine works is that all the user does is simply slide his or her hands to different points on the levers to vary mechanical advantage. And the reason you have to do this is we wanted to develop a machine that was kind of like a mountain bike for your arms. And I think all of us have ridden a bike. And with a mountain bike, you want to be able to go fast on flat ground, but shift into a low gear to climb up hills or go through mud. Well, this system can do that same thing. But the trick behind it is that all the mechanical complexity is in the person. They're doing the job of what a derailleur would do on your bike. They're doing the complex task of moving their hands to different positions. So if you need to go through mud or sand, you just grab high and you got a long lever and you can bench press your way out of trouble. And if you want to go fast, you just slide your hands down closer to the pivot, and every push you go through a bigger angle, and that creates a greater rotational velocity in the drivetrain, makes the chair go faster. And that relationship's represented in the equation in the lower right. Now with this system, what we can achieve is a 4-to-1 change in mechanical advantage. And that's very large in terms of like bicycle gear trains. To put this in perspective, the most high-end Shimano XTR mountain bike drivetrain, which costs over $1,000, gives you a 6-to-1 change in mechanical advantage. So with this system, with just its single gear ratio, regular bike chain drive, gives you 2/3 the performance for under $20, so under 1/50th the cost. The second benefit is that users with this system in our testing and in developing world testing are able to go 20% faster than a normal wheelchair and actually produce 20% more power for the same level of exertion. So they can go farther, faster, more efficiently. Also, because the levers are long, they can produce more torque at the wheels than with a normal wheelchair and go off-road like no other mobility aid available. And then finally, because the system's based on regular wheelchair seating, the LFC can still provide the same seating and postural support as a normal wheelchair, which is important for people who have spinal injuries and don't want to develop pressure sores on their bottom. And so we can provide all that support, and when the levers are removed from the LFC, it becomes just a normal wheelchair, and you can use it indoors like any other wheelchair. One key element of the design behind the chair is that it can be locally produced and repaired anywhere in the developing world. So to test if this was possible, we produced locally the first trial chairs in Kenya with our partner, the Association for the Physically Disabled in Kenya, and used all local materials and tools. And the key facet of the design that makes it so locally repairable and producible is that every single moving part in the LFC is made of a bicycle component and local materials. So the rear hub is just a bicycle hub strengthened with water pipe and electrical conduit. The drivetrain is a single-speed bicycle drivetrain made out of parts that have been around for over 100 years, and you can buy in any developing country. And the front wheel is just a bicycle hub and the pedal bearing of a bicycle, bottom bracket bearing. And because we use these components, and because you can get the same component standards anywhere in the developing world, and we looked in about 7 countries in Southeast Asia, Africa, Central America, you could literally build the chair in China and fix it in Guatemala or fix it in Africa or wherever you want. You can get these parts anywhere. And the second benefit is the parts cost $1 per pound. So even though we have this complex drivetrain, or additional drivetrain to a normal wheelchair, our chair doesn't cost any more than a normal wheelchair does. The worldwide average price would be about $200, so it really keeps the price low. We conducted our first trial in East Africa last year from August to January with 6 full-time mobility aid users. And this chart is showing you how they rated the performance of the LFC versus their normal mobility aid on a variety of terrains. So the first it goes from indoors to pavement, and then rough roads, rough terrain, long distances. And we saw that there wasn't really a benefit, and actually the LFC performed worse indoors and on pavement, but it did seem to provide a benefit long distance off-road rough terrain, which is what we intended the device for. But looking closer at this data, when we looked at active wheelchair users, and what I mean by that quantification is that these people need the seating and postural support of a wheelchair specifically. They can't really sit up on like a bench for a hand cycle, but they are mobile enough and active enough that they can power themselves to get around. There was a big difference in indoor mobility between their normal wheelchair and the LFC, but also a big difference in outdoor and long distance and rough road mobility. So we're seeing the rough terrain benefits we wanted, but from this data we saw that really it wasn't such a good wheelchair when you took the levers off and wanted to use it indoors. So from these users in the first trial, the 3 main complaints that we got are, 1, the chair is too wide, and it made it difficult to get indoors, get through doorways, and navigate around the home. 2, it felt too tippy, and they felt precarious going up a hill. And 3, it was too heavy. It was about 20 pounds heavier than their normal wheelchair. So after going through this trial, after going back to Africa, following up with these trial subjects, we embarked on the next generation design, which I'll introduce you to now. So this next generation design, we were able to reduce the width through a variety of tricks of tapering the seat, jogging the levers, thinning the tires. All of these brought the wheels in closer to the user. And by making these modifications, we were actually able to get the chair 1 inch narrower than the competing chair on the market for the same width seat. To reduce tippiness, we dropped the center of gravity by 4 inches and also installed this little back pad that hits you right between the shoulder blades. And this is particularly important for people who do not have a good abdominal strength because of a spinal injury. When they push on the levers, they just cantilever their back over the seat. But this pad, just like a bench press bench holds you when you're doing bench press, holds your torso stationary so forces can go from the levers through your arms, through the shoulders, right into that pad. So they feel really secure. And then to address the weight issue, we modified the design to reduce tubing thickness or tubing size in the upper part of the frame, took out a lot of the mounting hardware to adjust the seat forward and aft, to adjust center of gravity, and we're able to lighten the frame by the entire chair by 20 pounds. So with these modifications, the chair is as small as a normal wheelchair, as light as a normal wheelchair, and much more comfortable and much more usable. So here's a bit of video showing the new chair in action. And the most important point I want to convey here is that all of these design changes were motivated by stakeholders. We gave the first trial chairs out, let the stakeholders use them for a few months, went back, collected feedback from them, built that relationship where they felt comfortable enough to say, you know, this chair's kind of crap in some situations. And then developed this new design with a partner in Guatemala. So this was a very powerful example of really combining the innovation of a bunch of us at MIT with these really talented local innovators in Guatemala and East Africa. Now, I think this project of the LFC ties into this future of technology thought that I've been turning over a lot, thinking about my upcoming career, I guess, in academia, of global design, research, and education. And by this, I don't mean just focusing on international development design, not just focusing on design in developed countries, but really combining resources in both contexts in solving problems that affect the world as a whole. So really global design solutions. And what I think is exciting about this is when you're talking about problems that affect the whole world, you're also talking about potential global impact if you make a difference and make a dent in some of these problems. So I like looking at some of the big problems facing the world today, talking about clean water, talking about immunization for children, talking about indoor air quality and burning biofuels. And I think as an engineer, you can turn those problems around and think about what sort of technological solutions can I come up with to help remedy these problems. So thinking about low-cost filtration and needle-free injection and looking at the thermodynamics and heat transfer of combustion and coming up with low-cost, robust, particle-free cooking stoves. So looking ahead on a career in this is very exciting, and I think a very exciting field of future technology. Another important point in this is that I think it's very exciting for students, and it inspires them to be engineers. So to give you an example, MIT has this program called D-Lab, and the D stands for Design, Dissemination, Development, but it's based around developing world technologies. And right now, over 200 students are involved in 10 classes, and over 50% of the students are women in historically a field that's very underrepresented by women. And so this program at MIT has actually become larger than some departments. And I think it's because students get to see how their technical skills can be directly applied to help people out around the world. And that's a very compelling message, and I think motivating for engineers. The other point I want to make is I think this is a tremendously underdeveloped research field. Talking to professors at different schools, there's very few faculty around the country right now that have a core of their research focus on the developing world. I think the thought is that these type of projects are more undergrad focused in service learning, and I don't think that's true at all. There's huge problems in the column on the left that, you know, I think as researchers we would love to solve a problem that potentially affects millions, if not billions of people. So there's huge opportunity for future research here in future technology, I think. Now, what I think global design entails, if you're going to combine the skills of people throughout the world and solve problems that affect the world, is what I touched on before, that you need that link to local stakeholders. You need that link to where the technology is going to be applied. So that involves understanding the local terrain, understanding your stakeholders, building that relationship where they can give you honest feedback and you can give them honest feedback and really exchange ideas, understanding the constraints of the local environment, and also what elements of the local environment you can exploit to improve your design, and then bringing the technology back to the environment, testing it there, and seeing if it actually works. I think a lot of us read about, you know, people that come up with the next best technology for clean water or something, but you may go there and find that it tastes weird or it looks weird and people won't adopt it because of some local reason. I think a great example of somebody who's done this successfully is General Electric, who in China realized that they were going to be taken over by a Chinese company if they couldn't engage in the medical market more aggressively, and specifically with ultrasound machines. And they realized that the $100,000 ultrasound machines that they make now wouldn't really work in China, but that people were willing to accept a 50% performance solution for 15% the cost. And so they were able to develop this new technology. It's been tremendously successful in the developing world, and then opened up a new market in the US, and they've sold these successfully throughout the US to like rural health workers. So great opportunity for global design. My last slide is that I've been thinking about what's a career look like for people who would want to take the academic route in this field. And I think for undergrads, you have opportunities, I suspect, at this school with organizations like Engineers Without Borders, so you can engage in the developing world. At MIT, we have D-Lab and undergrad research opportunities. Then I think as you go through academia, there's chances to take these designs, global designs, and develop them rigorously within an engineering context. So this woman in the picture here developed a wound healer that provides suction on a wound, and using basically a toilet plunger. But she went through and looked at all the stiffness of the plunger and the pressures developed, and really used a deterministic process to make this thing perform perfectly. And then I'm in the stage now where I'm looking at what sort of career do I want to build as an academic, and how can I figure out what big problems are out there to develop over the next 10, 20 years? How can I quantify them in a scientific and engineering context, and really look at the underlying physics and underlying academic valuable things in the problems, and then disseminate them through conventional academic means, through journals and conferences, et cetera. And then I think in the future, there's room to grow these types of technologies into firms that maybe take technologies out of a lab and commercialize them. And a great example of this is Paul Pollock's group, IDE, and they create technologies to help alleviate people from poverty. So it's exciting to think about that 10, 20, 30-year scheme down the line in academia, and think about how can you grow these technologies to affect big global problems and do it on a large scale. So thank you very much for your time, and if you want to learn more, check out this website. I'd like to thank my team members on the LFC, our international partners, and our sponsors. Thanks very much.